Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third edition of the Editorji, TERI, UNDP, Paani, Connecting the Drops campaign. What we've essentially been trying to do for the last 2 to 3 months is figure out the main issues that are required if you have to solve the water crisis, and then month by month, take a look at the sub-issues that are involved. So we started off, as you know, a couple of months back by saying, here are 5 broad areas that we should look at, from catching the rain and having water harvesting to finding ways of conserving water, which is the second one. That's what we're going to be looking at today. Then you figure out how to prevent contamination of groundwater and contamination of our rivers. That would be the third part. Fourth would be, how do you use effective technology for water? And the fifth would be, how do you get water to all citizens wherever they are? And the Har Ghar Jal and campaigns like that are playing a role in that. So that's what we've been doing so far. This month and on today, we're going to be taking a look at water conservation. And I have to say, we are really privileged to have a fantastic panel with us on this. Professor Kanchan Mukherjee of the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, has done some sterling work on how behavioral change can take place out here. Dr. Vibha Dhawan is one of our key partners, the Director General of TERI. So it's a pleasure to have her with us. And Shakti Kant Khanduri, also one of our partners, Senior Advisor, UNDP, been former Inspector General of Forests at the Ministry of Environment, done a lot of work in this entire area. And it's a privilege to have with us Laxman Singh, the founder of GVNML, which is an institution that has done a lot of work at the ground levels. So Laxman ji, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, आप भी हमारे साथ हैं. Right. If I could just start off by maybe getting each of you to understand the entire broader picture. As I said, we were looking last month at how the supply of water can be increased through rainwater harvesting and other such methods. Now let's turn to the demand side, right? The conservation of water. I just wanted to ask you, what would be your overall thoughts on how water can be conserved? Professor Mukherjee, should we start with you? How do you think water can best be conserved in India? How do we reduce the demand and reduce the wastage?
We explored the human aspect in domestic water conservation, some time back in a field study which ran 3 years in an affluent residential community in Bangalore. And the question we asked is, so our focus was on domestic water conservation, and whether the concepts that we used can be extended to industry or the agriculture is still to be seen. So we still need to do some work on that front to see if the effects that we've seen in the domestic sector can extend to the other sectors as well. So the question that we asked is that, can we somehow influence household water conservation behavior, and most importantly, do so in a persistent and sustainable way? Because there are many efforts that have happened in the past where the effect has not been persistent. So that has been the real challenge. So in our investigations, the first thing we noted was that domestic water use, as you alluded, is largely driven by habit. That is, people respond in automatic mode without much conscious thought while engaging in the use of water for various needs at home. So that is why attempts to persuade people to conserve water by appealing to their better senses have had limited success. I mean, this is due to because people may get influenced by these messages temporarily, but the force of habit eventually takes over and behavior changes not live. Hence, a successful intervention would require a breaking of current wasteful habits and building better ones. And breaking of habits is not easy.
So you have to change the habit. That's the broad thing. So you have to break the old habit and make it a new habit. And if you don't do that, it'll only be a short-term effect. Is that the substance of it?
That is the message, and that's what we found.
All right. I'm going to come back in more detail to try and get some ideas from you as to how the habits can be broken. Vibha, if I could come to you next, Dr. Dhawan. Just wanted to ask you, yes, a lot of intervention, a lot of the messaging has been around how do we change habits, how do we get people to conserve water domestically in households, and also what industry should do. But if you look at the data, would it be correct, Dr. Dhawan, to say that 90% of all the use of water is actually in agriculture? So one of the priority areas has to be to figure out how do you conserve water and how do you prevent wastage in agriculture?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because it's more than 80% of the fresh water which goes for irrigation purposes. And still we are saying it's only 66% of the agriculture which is irrigated. So there is scope to increase the water usage if we bring everything under irrigation. Now, the major problem, because see, it is if you pay price for anything, you value that. In our country, the problem is agriculture becomes a political issue. We talk about farmers' incomes and so on, and therefore water is practically free. Electricity is given to them free, and now with solarization, it is solar panels should be subsidized so that they are able to get water for irrigation purposes. With the result, the farmer is not conscious what to grow where. So paddy, for Punjab, it is not good to grow paddy, and similarly sugarcane is not the crop for Maharashtra. But because of water availability, they are doing that. The other is how much of water is lost in transportation. Even when we talk of canals, the large program that Prime Minister has announced, very good, we need canals, but somewhere we also need to see how much of water will get wasted. The third is technologies are available. In terms of choosing the crop, like when we talk of rice, there are technologies that you can go for direct sowing rather than raising the nursery in water. So those are different varieties, and over there one can definitely think of choosing the varieties which are more water efficient, and at the same time following practice where you can get more crop per drop. The most important thing, we are talking of micro irrigation for such a long time, but it's a very small percentage of our farms which have made use of it. There is another technology, what we call subsoil irrigation or precision agriculture. Now, precision agriculture, the moment you think about it, you find, oh, it's very expensive. It is very expensive because we haven't put value to our natural resources. Urea is subsidized, water is free. With the result, the cost of the pipe appears to be very high. But the moment you put value to our fertilizer, then, and also to our nature, because otherwise what happens is that half of it is going to the atmosphere as ammonia, and some half is also going and polluting our aquifers, the fertilizers. So the moment you go for precision agriculture, where you are only putting water in the root zone and every drop is therefore absorbed by the plant. So you are taking care that there aren't many weeds, and you are not polluting your water. So that way one can conserve water, and which is the need of the hour, because we have to grow more crops and we also have to increase area under irrigation.
All right, I think those are some really interesting ideas which we will try and circulate. I mean, the whole point of this program is try and get ideas and put them out. So you're correct in saying agriculture is the one major thing that should be focused on. Look at the cropping patterns, look at the waste of water, try and figure out ways of micro irrigation. All of those are very, very important things. Laxman Singh ji, agar मैं आपकी तरफ बढ़ूं, आपने इतना काम किया है on various areas like rainwater harvesting and other places. अगर किसानों से बात करनी है, कहना है कि water का conservation कैसे किया जाए, micro irrigation कैसे की जाए, सही crops को कैसे लगाया जाए, कुछ ऐसे crops हैं जो शायद नहीं लगाए जाने चाहिए एक particular इलाके में जहां पानी की shortage है. तो आपको कैसे लगता है किसानों से कैसे बात की जाए इन सब मुद्दों पर?
नहीं, हम तो किसानों से बात ही कई सालों से करते आ रहे हैं और काम भी किया है. किसान समझते हैं, लेकिन उनके साथ मिलकर के मिलना पड़ता है और मिलके के काम किया तो हम कुछ सफलता हासिल हुई. असलियत ये है कि किसानों के साथ बैठ करके और हमने ये काम किया था कि कौन सी ऐसी फसल हो सकती है जो बरसात के पानी, रेनफेड से ही वो पनप सकती है। हम राजस्थान के रहने वाले हैं। राजस्थान में कुछ एरिया ऐसा है कि जहां बारिश होती है वहां जमीन मॉइस्चर पकड़ता है, और मॉइस्चर में चना बहुत अच्छा होता है, तो ग्राउंड वाटर हमने छेड़ा नहीं। तो जो जो ग्राउंड वाटर बढ़ता गया, फिर हमने सरसों ली है, हमने कुछ छोटी जगह मेथी और गेहूं लिया है जहां पर ग्राउंड वाटर से कुछ पानी लिया, लेकिन ज्यादा नहीं लिया, इसलिए हमारा ग्राउंड वाटर बढ़ता गया। फिर हमने ये चीजें भी सोची है कि हमारा एरिया का जो पानी है वो ऊपर से नीचे, ऊपर का मतलब है जहां रिस लाइन है वो नीचे कैसे कैसे बहता है, किस गांव की किस तरफ बहता है, उसको कैसे रोका जा सकता है। फिर एक गांव में रोकने के बाद जब उनका पूरे तालाब वगैरह सब भर जाए तो फिर दूसरे गांव की तरफ कैसे जाए, फिर तीसरे गांव की तरफ कैसे जाए। ऐसे हम कोई 50 किलोमीटर की दूरी में ये काम किया, जिसमें करीबन काफी गांव आते हैं, और फिर आगे भी काम चल रहा है। तो यानी कि ग्राउंड वाटर राजस्थान में कम काम लेना चाहिए, क्योंकि ग्राउंड वाटर कम होता है, इधर बारिश कम होती है। हमारा एरिया 400 mm से 600 mm बारिश वाला होता है, लेकिन हमने जो काम किया वो 800 mm के ऊपर ओवरफ्लो स्टार्ट होता है और 1200 mm ये झेल सकता है। यानी कि बाढ़ और सूखा दोनों एक साथ रुक सके। काम ऐसा किया कि पानी को पकड़ा तो सूखा रुका, और पानी को पकड़ा तो फ्लड रुका, तो ग्राउंड वाटर बढ़ा, और ग्राउंड वाटर को कम काम में लिया, क्योंकि ऐसी फसलें हमने हर 3 गांव में 3 साल तक बोई। मिर्ची कौन सी हो जिसमें कम पानी लगे, मूंग की फसल ली। मूंग की फसल कौन सा मूंग हो सकता है, जितने भी मूंग थे भारत में वो 3 गांव में बोए गए 3 साल तक। ऐसे ही चना बोया गया, ऐसे ही और फसलें, बाजरा कौन सा लिया हमने, वो सारी फसलें फिर डिसाइड की कि हमारे एरिया में ये काला चना देसी जो है वो हमारे एरिया में अच्छा हो सकता है, कम पानी में हो सकता है। ऐसे
और जब आपने, अगर मैं आपसे उसको लेकर एक सवाल पूछूं, जब आपने कहा कि आपको ये फसल बोनी चाहिए, तो क्या किसानों ने पाया कि वही वही फसल लगाकर उनका फायदा हुआ, फिर उनको ज्यादा पैसा मिला, फसल भी अच्छी होगी?
हाँ, क्या होता है कि अगर हम नेचुरल रिसोर्स मैनेजमेंट एनआरएम में अगर ढंग से काम करेंगे तो इन चीजों पे ध्यान देना पड़ता है कि किसानों को पानी कम लगे। पानी उठाने में भी तो खर्चा लगता है, डीजल लगता है, बिजली लगती है, फिर बहुत सारे इंस्ट्रूमेंट खरीदने पड़ते हैं। पर नेचुरल अगर हम फसल करें, जैसे मैंने बोला काला चना बोया जाए, तो एक तो महंगा होता है, एक मॉइस्चर से होता है, पानी पिलाने की जरूरत नहीं है। पानी पिलाओ तो आप एक पानी पिलाओ तो आपके सारे खर्चे भी बचे, मतलब बिना खर्ची फसल हो और अच्छी पैदावार हो। तो उस एरिया का जमीन क्या कहती है, वातावरण क्या कहता है, वहां का टेम्परेचर क्या कहता है, वहां का बीज कैसे वहां पे पनप सकता है, वो कौन सा लाइक करता है, वो हमने 3 साल तक जब देखा तो हमने ही नहीं देखा, वो लोगों ने भी देखा। कोई किसान आता है, कोई दूर से आता है, कोई नजदीक से आता है, वो फसलें देखता है। फिर एक यात्रा चलती है हमारी धरती जतन यात्रा, तो उसमें सब लोग देखते हैं, वो हर साल चलती है। तो हर साल वो फसलें देखे, वो बीज देखे, वो पानी देखा, वो तरीका देखा। तो वो जो जो हमने काम किया, जो जो उनके दिमाग में बैठता गया, अलग से बताने की जरूरत नहीं है। फिर भी अलग से बताने की जरूरत हो तो हमारे गेट खुले रहते हैं, हमेशा कभी भी आए, कोई देखे सब।
Mr. Kanduri, if I can just come to you, you've been, of course, Inspector General of Forests, you've been at the Ministry of Environment. Everything that Laxman Singh ji just said and Vibhaji said is logical, it's scientific, it's the correct way to approach it. Actually, though, if you look at it, there are distortions. And Vibhaji, I think, alluded to some of it, because electricity is free and other things are done in a certain manner. Cropping patterns are not what is natural. Lakshmanji was talking about grow the crops that are natural in a particular area. Just because you have free electricity and free water, quote unquote, you shouldn't be necessarily growing paddy. It's economically doesn't actually, it makes sense for India to be exporting rice from a purely economic point of view. But if you think about it and you consider the amount of water that is being exported along with that rice, then you've got to scratch your head and saying there's something not quite right for a water-scarce country to be exporting water in the manner that there is. So how do you fix some of these distortions?
Overall, Mukarji, it's the problem of water is very apparent now, and all the sectors in government, of course, are going to be quite wary about this, and all the policies related to particularly agriculture, industry, everything will be actually looking at this aspect also while formulating the overall people's welfare. Recently, you might have noticed there was a UNCCD COP where, and in that also, the issue of land degradation or desertification has been discussed in quite a lot, and a lot of commitments have been given by the government of India also about the restoration of almost 26 million hectares of degraded lands. Now, for all these things are actually directed towards improving the water availability, and naturally, of course, the demand side will be dealt accordingly. Well, subsidies, costings, and all those things are one part of the policies. But yes, eventually it has to be seen that how the water, whatever is available in the country, how can it be used to put to best use. And that is how the Dr. Dhawan's suggestion was that, can we improve the canal system, actually, canal network in the country, so that, the intermittent losses of water can be arrested, and more area can be brought under irrigation. But at the same time, the researchers, particularly ICR, have been doing a lot of work on the technologies and the processes and methods of undertaking agriculture with less and less water possible. Right. Drought, water stress has been one of the major concerns of agriculture research quite since beginning. And we have several, even, in addition to Soil and Water Conservation Research Institute of ICR, every other research institute has some other kind of work going on improving we call it water use efficiency of agriculture crops. So those are thrust areas in the researches, and things are improving also.
Okay.
So I think the combined, combination of all these kind of measures could ultimately, give some results.
All right.
It cannot be in short term, of course. Yeah.
All right. So take a long-term approach in this. Professor Mukherjee, let me just come back from agriculture to domestic and industry. There is industrial use and industrial wastage to be stopped, and domestically. A lot of the steps that are being done, we are talking about, are really to the government to do, but domestic conservation is something that each of us can play a role in. You said you have to change the habit. You have to, and you've written lots of articles about this in Forbes and others, that how do you change that habit to say it is now natural for me to approach water with a view that I'm not going to be wasting it, I'm going to conserve it, from a more profligate sort of an approach. How do you do it? Let me just get it from you in a few lines. How do you do it? How do you change the habit?
All right. So we have a framework where we use 3 steps. So our first step is to provide households with data of their actual usage coupled with a well-defined specific usage goal or target. So people in communities where water availability is plentiful are typically unaware of how much water they are using. So if you ask someone to estimate the liters of water he uses every day, the response is likely to be well below the actual amount. You can try it in your office as well. So it is also well known that challenging goals that are specific induce greater motivation and better performance than general do your best kind of goals. So hence, simply imploring people to conserve is unlikely to lead to sustained conservation behavior unless you accompany that a benchmark or a target consumption to aim for. So ultimately, we can be motivated to change a behavior only once we are aware that it needs changing in the first place. I mean, for example,
first let people know. So just to recap, you're saying, first of all, let people know how much water they are consuming, because only when they realize how bad that there is actually the overuse of water, that's the only time they will feel compelled to change.
Exactly. So they need to know what to change, and that is the important thing. So if you are overspending on monthly groceries and you don't know it, then you will not attempt to save at all. So in our studies, we use the WHO recommended benchmark of 60 LPCD as the target usage. So the step 2 is basically providing a regular feedback. So the feedback tells the user how much water they are using vis-a-vis the target at regular intervals, say in weekly intervals. And this acts as a constant reminder, and it is like a progress report. So there is a constant chase and there is a constant reminder, which keeps it in their conscious minds, so prevents the habit from kicking in, basically. Old habits. And finally, step 3 consists of 5 conservation tips. So people should know how to achieve conservation, and tips help them move towards their goal. The tips could be related to installation of efficiency devices like shower timers or water flow controller valves, or they could be behavioral, like various water saving practices, like how to take navy showers, wash full load in washing machines, water plants only in the night, and so on. So there are many practices that can act as good tips. So we found that all 3 tips are essential. So all 3 steps are essential for sustained water conservation. So in our study, there was over 15% average reduction in usage that persisted for well over a year after the intervention. So now whether these concepts can be applied in any way at like individual level, let's say for a farmer or not, is kind of an open question.
But 15% sustained over a year means that is something that can actually materially make a difference. But it's sustained. It's not something that you're doing because you've seen an ad and you're saying, I'm acting on this, make it sustained. Well, when we are talking about conservation, and when you talk about anything, actually, any social cause, anything that you want to do, I have long been an advocate that the best way and the most effective way is to get young people involved. So we are very lucky to have with us right now Aditya Mukherjee, who's the head of environment at the Shri Ram School Aravali, represented India at the UN Youth Climate Summit in 2019. He got more awards than I can mention in a fair period of time, from the Diana Award to Atmanirbhar Champion, you name it, he's got all the awards. So Aditya, great to have you with us, and Krishnav Saxena of St. Mary's School at Dwarka. Thank you both so much for joining us. I'm just going to come to you young people for a few minutes to get your sense of it, because how can that change happen? We're all of a slightly different generation. Sometimes the best ways to communicate are known by you more than are known by the rest of us. So Aditya, why don't I start off with you? You can unmute yourself, and you too, Krishnav. Aditya, you've been doing a fair amount of work on how you spread the message on water conservation and how it should be done. What have been your key learnings, and what sort of suggestions and advice would you want to give the rest of us?
So the key learning has been that talking to people has to be, you have to talk to them from their perspective. What is impacting them directly? So you take them, what I did was, I went to the children first. Adults would have been much harder to convince. So I took the children. Just outside my college, there's a drain. I showed them, this is your drain, which is emptying out into the Yamuna River just outside Sona. I showed the problem to them, brought the problem into their homes. Then I also try to connect the problem of water pollution, all forms of pollution, to water pollution, and then highlighted the importance of water conservation and gave them very simple habits which they could imbibe in their personal lives to make their changes. So such as informing their didis and bhaiyas not to waste the water that they've used to clean vegetables, but to reuse it to water plants, or use aerators in their taps rather than this normal tap that helps conserve 50% of the tap water. So such simple tactics is what really helped me get my message across. And like I said, I went to the children first, because when the children change, the adults are forced to change.
Yeah, that's been a really, but just curious to know, how effective was it? Did you go back at any point and see whether that change actually persisted for a while?
Of course, I went back 2 or 3 times to check whether the change actually persisted, and I was happy to see that it did. And the children were actually going and telling their families and their friends to do the same, and they were creating this ripple effect and a domino effect. So if I convinced two, they convinced two more, and so on and so forth.
Okay, Krishnav, why don't you share your experience? What did you do to try and spread the word of conservation and implement it actually in your school?
So I was an active member of the SDG club in our school, which we were told that conduct a survey and identifying the areas where water can be conserved in our school. So we did, and we realized that a lot of water was being wasted in washrooms, canteens, and while watering the green cover of in our school. So we presented this to the principal, and certain measures were taken. And like, for example, fixtures were installed in the washrooms and valves were installed in the pipes to reduce the flow of water. So this reduced the water usage by 60%. Besides this, our school also has a rainwater harvesting system with 5 recharging wells. Now the water in these wells, we use this as potable water for drinking. Also, the students are asked to water the plants in the school with the water they are left with at the end of the days. So now these are some things, some methods by which water can be conserved.
So I know, for example, Professor Mukarji, who's here, and many others have written a lot of stuff about it takes a certain time for something to become a habit. And after it has become a habit, then it persists, and it persists for a long period of time. How many of those habits are these habits that only pop up when you are actually there talking to the school or others? Or is there change that then becomes lasting change that continues for a period of time?
So yes, sir. So like the water, which I talked about, the rainwater harvesting systems were used. The time when we told the students to empty the water bottles, this took quite a lot of time, because as Aditya said, it's the first we have to go to the children, talk to them, and we make an impacting effect on their minds, that what could happen to their future, to their generation, if we don't act right now. So of course, this is a long way to run.
All right. I'm now going to end with some final policy suggestions from all of you. So why don't I start with you, Dr. Dhawan? We know what the problem is. We know what are the issues are that has to be done. We know that ideally you should not be having free groundwater and free power and the distortions of crapping patterns. We should not be doing exports. These are all known, but given the reality of the situation, especially now, especially after the recent farm laws and all that happened after that, the possibility of government intervention to do any of that is, well, it's possible, but perhaps it's somewhat remote. So what would be your 1, 2, 3 suggestions that you think can actually be done right now? Yeah.
There was a World Bank study done recently in the state of Punjab. And what was actually done, there were meters put that how much of water is used for growing paddy. And the idea of doing such a study was that government is subsidizing them X amount through subsidy on electricity. So if one can work out a mechanism that shift to another crop, which is water friendly, or which will take care of natural resource of your own state, and transfer that money to them, because ultimately electricity also is money. So don't give them free electricity, give them rather transfer that amount of money to their account and let them grow the crop, which will be environment friendly for their own state and their own good. So that will
That's
not
actually really
upset the farmers.
Can I just make sure I've understood that suggestion correctly? Because it sounds like a really good suggestion. Say, don't grow this crop, grow this crop instead, because it's more ecologically friendly, it's conserving water, blah, and blah. And if you make the shift, we will give you this much as cash in your bank account. Go and spend it on whatever you want. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it may not be crop specific. It will be more of that in any case, we are subsidizing you X amount of money through free electricity. It is also, it has to do something with what sells in the market, because farmer is growing paddy because of support price he gets. So there is no support price, and it is always dicey to sell number of other crops. And that is another reason. And third, in terms of policy intervention, I'll say that give a soft loan to the farmer, let them save money in terms of using the natural resource, and let them put all these micro irrigation, sprinkler or subsoil irrigation. And the other is that we have to popularize varieties which are more water efficient, both crops as well as variety within that crop, and give those practices. The extension wing also needs to be much stronger from the agriculture universities. So we do have solutions, like we are talking of direct seeded rice for so many years, but still not popular. So therefore we will have to move a step forward in terms of extension. Thank you.
Kanduri, some 1, 2, 3 really quick suggestions if we can get from you on what can actually be done today for water conservation.
Yeah, my first suggestion will be that we need to invest much more on irrigation network, not on the dams and not on the sources. But I mean, not that it is not needed there, but the network and its efficiency, loss of arresting the loss of water in between. It must be arrested, and it should be given the biggest priority actually when we talk about water. And second will be on domestic front, rationing of water. It may look slightly odd, but rationing of water is an important thing. I come from mountains, and mountains cost of living is too much, and that high cost of living is much more owing to problem of water. So people have to either walk long distances getting water, or if it comes there, even those pipelines, etc., every day they have to see that these are maintained properly. They break every day.
All right. लक्ष्मण जी, अगर आपसे मैं पूछूं कुछ 1-2 सुझाव हैं जो आप सबको देना चाहेंगे जिससे पानी का बचाव हो सके।
पानी का जो बहाव है या पानी का जो दिशा है, पानी कितना बरसता है, उसके अनुसार अगर संरक्षण करें और उसके अनुसार यूज का काम करें, चाहे पीने का पानी के काम हो, चाहे कृषि के लिए। वैसे ज्यादातर कृषि काम में पानी ज्यादा काम आता है। कृषि को जो है वो ढंग से की जाए तो पानी बचेगा। दूसरा क्या है कि पानी को गंदा करके जो छोड़ते हैं उसमें पानी काफी बेकार जाता है, वेस्ट होता है। तो पानी को तरीके से, जो पानी खराब होता है उसको ढंग से अगर वापस ठीक कर दिया जाए तो काफी काम हो सकता है गांव का भी।
All right. Professor Mukherjee, last word from you. Any couple of quick suggestions that you might want to make on conservation?
Yeah, so I think there are, two things that are quite essential, because without these, it's going to be really hard to make a, long-term effect. So if you compare the water sector with any other sector, this sector has the minimum amount of hard data to work with. So there is a measurement problem, all around. So you don't have enough water meters, at least, in the urban sector, even Bangalore and other big cities, there's hardly any, data to work with. So there is a measurement problem. And, that measurement problem really, makes it harder, to identify pockets of opportunity actually, create sort of strategies around it. And the second one is, my second suggestion is the whole idea of goal specificity. And this is probably applicable to at individual level as well, and even at the level of society, and maybe even at the policy level. Specific, well-defined goals will always lead to better performance and better results than goals that are sort of general in nature.
So come up with specific goals, specific points, do A, B, C, as opposed to a more generalized, let's say water, let's not worry about water, come down to specifics, which in a sense is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and that is only possible. And that is only possible if we solve the measurement problem, actually, of water usage.
Okay. Get it down to specifics is what you have said, and that's what we're going to try and do. So we're going to leave it out here. What can be done for water conservation here? Just some of the suggestions that we've been hearing about today, and let's try and act on as many of them as possible. Dr. Dhawan did say that we should also turn our attention to recycling of water and what should be done with wastewater. Yes, that's going to be what we're going to be discussing next month in this Paani Connecting the Drops campaign. So do send us any thoughts and suggestions you have on that. We're going to be looking at that next month. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you. Bye.